Hi, I'm Stuart Fuel. I'm the Central Arkansas Library Systems Social Media Coordinator. I'm here this morning talking to Charly Palmer. Charly Palmer earned his BFA from the American Academy of Art in Chicago. He's an award-winning fine artist, illustrator, and graphic designer. He's illustrated 7 acclaimed children's books, including, recently, The Legend of Gravity, A Tall Basketball Tale, which Charly Palmer will be joining us at the Six Bridges Book Festival later this year to talk about that book. But there's also an exhibition of his work, Charly Palmer Telling Stories at Hearn Fine Art. Good morning, Charly Palmer. It's a pleasure to talk with you.
Thank you, Stuart. It's a pleasure to be here.
You're based in Atlanta right now.
Correct.
A good city for art.
Yeah, it's booming. I mean, we have actually this year is our first annual Atlanta Art Week, and it started to really take off well. It's getting a lot of promotion. Ironically, I didn't know anything about it until I was in New Orleans 2 weeks ago, and a couple of artists I ran into said they're coming to Atlanta for Atlanta Art Week, and I'm like, let me find out what this is all about. But it's pretty. Now that I'm finding out what, so I'm really excited because I'll be participating in that as well.
Right, one of those situations where you find out a little bit about home when you travel to other places.
That's always the case.
So to begin, I'd like to talk a little bit about your history. Professionally, you started in graphic art, is that correct? Graphic design and illustration?
Correct.
Before transitioning to fine art?
Right, that's correct.
And I feel like your art shows that history pretty clearly. The stories that you tell, you're not just painting. It seems that there's a lot of elements from graphic design, your graphic design background in your work that you use to tell those stories. Do you feel that the mixture of those graphic elements and the abstraction in your painting lends itself well to children's book illustration?
Absolutely. I think that like having a background in illustration is, I think, one of the differences in fine art and illustration in general is that illustrations have a tendency to tell more of a story, to illustrate a story, to make it more clear, make it clearer. And I think that when it comes to telling these stories to young people, I think I give them credit for the intelligence that they have, but the more information we can give them, the clearer the story or the text that's along with the image is. And so I think it lends itself very well for me to take like a manuscript and then do an interpretation of it. Especially those are the kind of assignments I take on. It's the one that when I read the manuscript, I can begin to visualize it immediately.
Do you feel like the kinds of stories that you want to tell with your art are the same when you're painting and when you're doing illustration work for children's books?
Yes and no. Like my commitment as an African American is to tell our story, and I think that becomes very important whether I'm taking on a book assignment or I'm doing a fine art piece. You know, there are certain legends like right behind me on this side.
Yes.
Sorry, it's James Baldwin. James Baldwin is my hero. He's inspired me on so many different levels, and so I have a tendency to paint things that move me, and that's what happens when I even take on an assignment. It's like I feel this character, I feel this story, and I think I can do it justice.
No, if I'm not mistaken, the first children's book that you illustrated, Mama Africa, that's the one that you have a Coretta Scott King, John Steptoe Illustrator Award for. Is that correct?
That's correct. That it was a total, a complete surprise. You know, I'm never motivated to do anything for acknowledgement, but it was quite an honor to receive an award for it.
And were you looking to get into children's book illustration when you took on that work, or did someone come looking for you and ask you to do that?
That's a great question, Stuart. It's like, yes, absolutely. I have had a passion and a love for children's books since I was a child. The idea, like A Snowy Day, which is a classic book, uh, shifted my life and shifted the idea of where I show up in this world. I mean, I was 5 years old when I first saw a book, maybe even younger, because I remember I couldn't even read it. But to look at it over and over again and to see myself um, was very uh, inspirational, and it has very much created who I am when it comes to how are we, meaning African Americans, represented. And so, again, being honored by that, being acknowledged, is to say that I guess I did well. But yeah, I have probably a collection of 200 children books, if not more. And I have a tendency also to buy a lot of books that are inspirational to gift to children when they come to visit me in my studio.
What are some of those titles? I'm just curious that you give to
Oh,
children who visit your studio.
well, the last one I got, I don't remember. I know it because I also gravitate towards certain illustrators, but I don't remember. I'm looking over at my bookshelf right now, and there's a ton of them over there. But right now, I'm drawing a complete blank.
It sounds though that like you you put a lot of effort into creating or trying to create the experience that you had reading Snowy Day, Keats, as a child for other children, other people now through the books that you work with and through the books that you give away at your studio.
Right. I mean, absolutely. I mean, like if you think about, and we can talk about the Legend of Gravity. I never considered myself an author, but I felt I had a story to tell. And I was very excited about that story, but a story that really was intended for myself and intended for some of the guys I grew up with. And so never that it crossed my mind that perhaps this is something I could get published. But now that I've done it, I'm very excited about doing the next one. And
The
it's
next one.
how do I capture that story in as fewer pages as I might have when doing a children's book.
So you will be discussing the Legend of Gravity here at the Six Bridges Book Festival at the Clinton Presidential Library on October 20th. But you say you're acknowledging you may do another. Assuming you'll stick with certain themes, right? That's what your personal vision is. What other sorts of experiences do you think you might write about? Do you have any ideas about where you might go besides basketball?
Great question. My second story was revisiting basketball that I submitted, but now I'm working through trying to wrap it up in a way. But it's really about, I think the stories that I tell are stories in which I'm saying that you're okay to be different, or you're okay to dance out in the open or sing out loud, but also addressing issues that keep coming up. And I think I address it from the standpoint of when I was young, I'm sorry, when I was young, I was not diagnosed with attention deficit disorder. Never heard of it. It probably didn't even exist at the time, or at least the term. And so I now realize that the insanity in which I operate makes perfect sense, but I call it a superpower. The fact that I can juggle several projects at the same time. I'm working on a children's book here. I'm working on an album cover here. I'm working on a magazine article here. I'm working on the next exhibit that I might be doing. And that's a day in the life of me pretty much almost every day. I'm all over the place, but that fact that I can focus to some degree, but I have to keep moving has really helped me to get to where I'm at. So I'm wanting to write a book kind of addressing that attention deficit disorder.
When we think about children's books and the fact the phrase representation matters, I think this is also important for those of us who are neurodivergent as well. There's lots of different ways that we can see ourselves represented in the pages of books. So I can only imagine how beneficial it might be for a child with attention deficit or some other neurodivergence to see that represented on a page, especially being illustrated and written by someone such as yourself who has such success as an artist. You've created a profession for yourself, an existence where you can refer to that as a superpower rather than a deficit.
Right.
It works into your success.
Absolutely.
We hope that all of our children will do.
You know what? But we find that there have been these people that have succeeded through, what they might say a deficit, but it is how you use it. And I think it's always been kind of intriguing and fascinating to me because I've read up on certain athletes that had an issue, but that issue helped to strengthen their skill. And so I want to tell that story, but there are other stories that I want to tell too. But I'm also always looking for, again, a manuscript that comes to me that's like, this has meat on it and I can really have fun with this.
When you're writing or creating art for children, do you find that limiting in any way, or versus creating art for maybe a more general audience, all ages, or strictly for adults, like your paintings maybe? Do you find that limiting just to be creating art for children?
I quite honestly, Stuart, I find it intimidating.
Okay.
Two things. It's intimidating because it's like I can talk to an audience of 500 people, adults, and not be extremely nervous. But I can talk to a group of 20 children and freak out. And I had to examine that over and over again. Like, why is it that I get so nervous when I talk to children? And it's because they matter to me more. And what I say to them is a message. And I think they might be listening. And if they are, I want to give them something. And so it's those kinds of things. Like I approach children with a seriousness that I don't necessarily do with adults. I don't want to say that adults. I'm not saying they don't intimidate me or they don't make me nervous or something, but children excite me and make me nervous at the same time because they are so important to me.
Mm. And would you say that's the importance of children? Is that why you continue to seek out opportunities to write and illustrate children's books? Because you want to tell them these important stories.
Right. It's me wanting to get to them in any way I can, because I also find that when I'm talking to young people, they often assume that I must be different, that maybe I came from wealth or my means were modest, if not lower than modest, but we survived. And so when a young person looks at me and think that I'm different, I have to kind of tell them where I came from and how I got to where I got to, and that they can too. And it's funny also, Stuart, like what I noticed about myself as a youth reading, when I started to read books, I found myself gravitating towards biographies, in particular black people, Martin Luther King or Malcolm X or Josh Gibson, you name it, Dick Gregory. These books, they always kind of started from some place in achieving something. And so I've always kind of wanted to tell and continue to tell that story and let young people know that I am no different than you are. I emphasize focus, commitment. I emphasize joy. I always say when I'm speaking with young people, I say, find something that you enjoy doing and you'll never have to work a day in your life. And I truly, really mean that. It's a blessing and a joy that I get paid to paint pictures all day.
I want to ask you about inspiration. Do you have to go looking for inspiration, or is your personal vision so well defined that you don't have to look for inspiration?
I absolutely love that question. Simply because when you have attention deficit disorder, everything around you stimulates you.
Everything.
And it's like there is There are sometimes distractions. Watching a movie or something like that, I'm looking at the paintings on a wall. I'm processing. I'm thinking. I'm looking at a combination of colors. I'm looking at lighting. My wife looks at me like the first time she really, really got me was when one morning we woke up and she said, "What are you thinking?" And I went through a list of about 25 things. And she's looking at me like I was crazy. Like, how could you be thinking those? I'm like, that's the way my mind works. I was like, what are you thinking? And she says, nothing. And I'm like, how can you possibly be not thinking anything? And that's kind of like where I'm at. I'm always seeing and I'm always trying to catalog in my mind. Sometimes it's a notebook, but it's writing lots of notes of things that are giving me inspiration. And sometimes I don't know exactly how I'm going to use that information
Mm,
initially, but at some point I'll go back, revisit it, or like I have over to, wait a minute, this side, there's photographs all over the wall, and those are
right.
all reference points for possible paintings in the future. It's like I'll cut them out, I'll take pictures, I'll put them, and then I'll sit for weeks, months, years sometime, and then one day I'll glance over and I'll have an idea, and I'll know how I'm going to use that image.
No, a lot of the paintings of yours that I'm familiar with, there's a lot going on. There's the primary figure. Then there may be secondary figures. There's a lot in the background. There may be words. There may be it looks like mixed media almost. That I think reflects your background as a graphic artist. Do you feel like that also maybe reflects all of the different avenues of input that you're receiving that inspiration from?
You know, I think that what I've tried to do, especially in the last few years, is simplify a little bit.
Mm,
I try to like a lot of my works have very simple backgrounds now because I want to almost solely focus on the four figure. Uh, and so I think I'm trying to simplify. I'm trying to simplify now. But yes, I think my graphic design background, I try very hard to not incorporate words into my work anymore because I think that's an easy, simple solution. But there
mm.
are times when, like, there's a painting in my head right now that it's probably going to use a lot of words in it. And so it kind of, I'm fluid when it comes to how I approach it. It's ultimately about what would be, excuse me, excuse me, what would be a good solution to telling a particular story. And so I'm not gonna. I try not to pigeonhole myself or trap myself into a limited a way of approaching certain subjects.
So taking the words off of the painting, off of the canvas or the surface, does that help you or perhaps lead you to putting the words on the page?
Um, they are they're very separate for me.
Okay.
And like I have thought about, and I had an opportunity even with the Legend of Gravity, is to paint a few words in, or perhaps paint some numbers in it, like there's a countdown in it. Those kinds of things are kind of fun to do. But I probably do very little lettering these days because I am trying to again simplify everything. And so, like the next book I might do, I might be pushing to even simplify the graphics a little bit more because I absolutely love, although a lot of my works are very busy. Uh, I love simplicity. I love simple shape and form, and that's really kind of important to me. Is how much can I simplify this and still tell a story?
All right. So, Charlie Palmer, thank you so much for talking with me today. We can't wait to see you at the Six Bridges Book Festival in October. We'll see you at the Clinton Presidential Center to talk about your book, The Legend of Gravity, that you wrote and illustrated. And then we'll see the exhibit Charlie Palmer Telling Stories at Hearn Fine Art. Thank you so much again for joining us.
Thank you. This was very painless.
Oh,
You know, it's terrible to say. I'm glad it's over with. I was a little nervous, and it's like, okay, this went very smoothly. So it's been an absolute pleasure, Stuart. Thank you. I look
same.
forward to getting to Little Rock and sharing my story and sharing my art with everyone.
We can't wait. Take care.
Right. You take care.